Welcome to the Food Startups Podcast.
Hey guys, we're coming to you today from Bogota. How's it going, Danny?
Hey, it's going great. Been here for about 3 days. Always good to get a little bit of change of pace. Things in Bogota are always a little bit busier.
Yeah, Bogota has about 10 million people. Medellin has about 2 to 3 million. It definitely moves at a faster pace here.
Yeah, I think Medellin punches above its weight if you're looking at population, because a lot of the great entrepreneurs and great companies of Colombia have come out of Medellin, but everyone still calls it a little town, a little pueblo, because of the fact that it's all about an agrarian culture, and farming is so big in that area that they always talk about my little pueblo Medellin.
And man, today has been difficult day. I know we're both trying to plan separate business trips back to the U.S. For me, it's, the West Coast, Midwest, and the East Coast. So planning airfare and all that stuff is kind of a headache.
Yeah. Matt and I were just talking about this, and, the logistics of travel are really crazy, because you have to, when you're going on any sourcing trips, or if you're dealing with ingredients, you have to go on trips specifically to places, and sometimes you have to pay really, really high prices. And also, when you go back to the States, you have to manage these big, long trips, and they can add up. And so I've become an expert in the past few years by learning about frequent flyer miles.
So, Danny, does that mean you can get free flights? How easy is it to do all this stuff?
Yeah, so I know this stuff has become frequent flyer miles and kind of hacking airline credit card redemptions. That's kind of the topic that I'm going to bring up. Basically, in the United States, if you're able to sign up for credit cards with good credit, you have the opportunity to earn bonuses that are based in airline miles. This means you get a new credit card, and you can actually get enough points that will get you a round-trip ticket, let's say, to Europe. Or you can get a one-way to Asia. But I use it to get back and forth tickets between South America and New York, because that's where my family's from, and that's where my base of business is from in the United States.
So yeah, in conclusion, many people may not be aware of this. Most people aren't. But we're just going to put a bunch of links that have way more detailed information on how to get free flights and at least reduced ticket prices on airfare. So maybe you can, if you want to make a sourcing trip, let's say to China or to South America or to the Middle East, you can probably at least get that first trip for free.
Yeah, and actually I'm going to throw in a little bit more info there. So two sources that I use are the pointsguy.com and the Frugal Travel Guy. I believe it's frugaltravelguy.com as well. However, they have incomplete information with regards to South America, and I've become pretty good at figuring out how to travel in South America. So if any of you listeners have any questions, specifically South America, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Argentina, all places that I've traveled to and traveled to basically for free, specifically using LAN, using Avianca as well. Avianca just released a 40,000 bonus point credit card today, or the past few days, and LAN is a big carrier in the United States that has very high domestic and international flights if you're paying in cash, especially from U.S. websites. But if you have points, you can actually, if you have points from British Airways or from American Airlines, two carriers that are partners of LAN specifically, you can actually fly very, very close to free very often. One quick example, I'm going from Bogota to Medellin tomorrow. I booked my flight 20 minutes ago. It costs $6 and 4,500 points, whereby a credit card that you get can give you 50,000 bonus points. So that's 10 short trips between Bogota and Medellin just for signing up for a credit card that actually the British Airways card that I'm talking about, will post the link onto it. It may not be active right now, but it's been active in the past. It cost me a $65 annual fee, and you can cancel it after the first year as well.
So let's get into the featured topic today, where we're going to talk about why maybe you shouldn't get involved with a food startup, because it's not for everyone. And we brought that up because we've been just discussing all of the challenges that we've both faced, and we compared it to other options for startups in general. So to start off, let's just talk about, why we did get into it. Danny, why did you get into the food business?
Matt, I've been in a few different types of businesses and have seen a few ways that businesses work over the past 5 to 7 years. And I worked in a business that was heavy into B2B social media. I worked in a business that was also heavy into selling digital inventory online, buying and selling. I worked in, and I've worked on different projects that have sold digital goods online as well, blogging. It spanned the whole gamut. Originally, I wanted to get into real estate. Real estate's really hard to get into in the past 5 to 10 years because of the economy. And food is something that is special in the sense that it was more of a challenge than any other business that I had been in before. I learned how to work with numbers. I learned how to penetrate new markets with businesses, but I'd never learned how to manufacture. And manufacturing and sales, those are two businesses I really wanted to get into. So actually, I literally dove into the food business because of the fact that I wanted to develop these skill sets, because it was a bigger challenge for me. And now I see that it's a huge challenge, man. If you sign up for headaches, you got to laugh when you get them. It's going to happen if it's a challenge. The short answer is I want a challenge. I had great challenges I'd conquered before, and the food industry just continues to an amazing learning experience. Matt, all right, I'm going to bring it back to you. So what about you? What's your story?
Well, I really stumbled upon it. As I may have mentioned before, I'm very into healthy eating and health foods. And I was maybe in 2012 or 2011, but a couple years ago, I was just going into a random health food store that was from indigenous Peruvians here in Bogota. And I started getting into all the Peruvian ingredients and specialty products. And when I found one that I really liked and was looking online and found so little supply in the U.S., I just decided to throw it online and give it a try. And from there, I've gotten into all sorts of things.
Absolutely. And that's awesome. I think that, that story is a story that's organic. It's a story that comes with filling a need and filling a need that you see wasn't being filled before by you, by the fact that you wanted to buy something that wasn't being offered. And you did what it takes to get in there and solve that problem.
A lot of it too, Danny, it's just trial and error, just trying things, because as Steve Jobs famously said about shipping, until you really take something to the end, you don't know if you're really going to like it. Like, starting a food business, until you're selling and until you're managing all the logistics and all the difficult things that are involved, that's when you know if you like it. And this applies to everything.
Yeah, that's very true. It's very true. And a good friend, a very successful food entrepreneur, told me that the secrets actually of being a successful entrepreneur in the food industry, it's not being the smartest with numbers, but it's actually just doing what it takes, and it's actually just having a lot of hunger and just working really, really hard. These things that are really vague. I think I've mentioned this before even on the podcast, but it's not about those special skills we look for or the special skills we say that we have when we're applying for jobs out of college, like analytical skills or sales skills. It's just about having grit and being able to hustle a little bit.
Yeah, and it's really a weird question. People are like, what's your skill set? I don't really know what my skill set is. I just try to do things. And maybe it's really difficult to define exactly the skill set needed for these types of businesses.
I got a bad joke for you. You can be called a Matt of all trades.
Well, yeah. You're right. You have to pick up a lot of trades in the food business, right? And we've covered that, and we'll cover that in other episodes. But we want to convince you not to start a food business, right? Let's play the devil's advocate here. When we were looking at the list of reasons not to start a food business, we first looked at the difficulties in economies of scale, particularly for the packaging, food product, and logistics behind it.
Yep. All right. Packaging. Really quick example. I'm packaging some brownies and I am selling them in an organic market. I'm trying to sell packs of 5 or 6. So people aren't going to eat them right away. Okay, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to buy something that has that at least increases shelf life a little bit. I'm going to have to make sure that it's food safe, and I'm going to go to a store where I'm going to buy a roll or I'm going to buy bags that are going to cost at per unit something that's going to be, I would say, between 40 and 50 cents. Now, change that over to and I'm not going to even have I'm not going to have that bag branded or anything. Transfer that over to an established company that's pushing 50,000 units, and they have a bag that costs 3 cents. It's branded and it's nice. How can you compete? That's one huge challenge I've seen.
Right. So it's like, you're starting up. Not only is your brand weaker because you're new and you haven't established yourself, but your costs are actually higher per unit than these bigger companies, which makes it really tough. And you also find that, and this kind of makes sense, right? For all these clients, your supplier, your packaging company, you're worth less money. So you're going to get poorer service just because you're paying them less money.
Yep. You're going to have higher unit costs, and you're just going to have people that don't get back to you for weeks because they're running around for another client that's pushing 100,000 per month.
Now, the second thing, and we're going to transition this into an example of a contrary business, is the startup capital. It's expensive. We've just talked about, you're losing on economies of scale, but there's a lot of trial and error here with the food.
Yep.
So it can take a while before you're making profit, and there's other businesses that are a lot faster.
Yeah, absolutely. Startup capital, you really need to have people working on the sourcing side and then working also on the selling side. Even if you're getting things co-packed, if you have distribution deals lined up, if you've got everything connected, it's still going to cost you some money. And then it's also going to be hard to test because you can't just test a packaging where you print 3,000 units and see how the public's going to react and then change it the next day. And so we're going to get into that in a little bit, where you can do that with some different industries. So it's going to be really, really hard for you to actually get up and do anything with $5,000, $10,000, $15,000.
Right. And on top of that, involved in the capital, you're going to have to deal with permits and food sanitation, right? Really, if you're going to launch a food product, you have to understand if someone has allergies to peanuts, you could potentially kill someone. Right, that's a drastic example, but you have to deal with all these sanitation and permits. Things can go bad. You can be dealing with government agencies. They may not let your products in because they don't comply to a certain standard.
Yep. And now let me, Matt, I'm going to take a step back for just 1 second, and I'm going to actually go over these, and I'm going to talk about a little bit about some changes in the past 10 years in the food industry and how they've made some of these things easier, but still they're really hard. For scale, and for difficulties in scaling, Kickstarter is a great resource that many use, especially in complex manufacturing of things like watches, accessories, things that have not even been done before. There are teams out there that have launched successful $1 million Kickstarter campaigns that have raised that funding so that they can actually get inventory at low costs, have companies and suppliers respect them, and have a strong business from the get-go. 2, you do have farmers markets that have sprung up, and you have a culture of food in the United States that's more natural. And because it was so unnatural in the last maybe 30 years, you do have niches that are naturally there that are waiting to be picked. Okay, so I just wanted to mention those 2 things.
And I think that's true, and this is probably a lot of industries because of the internet and the organic health conscious movement. It may be easier than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's still super, super, super hard. It's gotten a little bit easier. But it's still tremendously hard to compete. And it's just tremendously hard to even get into the ring to be able to compete. That's the big thing. Because if you have an idea and everyone loves it, and if it's in food and beverage, it's about the taste of it, you have to get that to start making money. It's just so, there's so many challenges, and when you're dealing with established players, it's just going to be hard.
So listen, we're doing this podcast about why not to start a food business, but we know you guys are all entrepreneurs. You guys are all trying to do something here, and the last thing you want is someone to tell you you can't be an entrepreneur. So we're not telling you that. We're saying where you may have more control and require less startup capital.
Yeah, definitely.
So give us an option here.
Okay, so I kind of view this as stepping stones. I think complete entrepreneurs build skill sets over time, and it's really hard to build a skill set of 10 when you're starting with 1 or 2. So if you want to start with something, if you want to start a company where you're going to give yourself and your company a strong sales experience and marketing experience, you might want to be selling digital products. This can be a book on a platform that sells on Amazon.com. It can be an app that sells at the iTunes store. It's going to require a skill set to create the product that you might have that you might not have in the food industry. And then it might also focus you in on something that's a little bit easier to execute than, say, creating a company that sells perishable fruit or something similar like that has its huge challenges.
Right. And obviously this is not a podcast about that, but we're going to direct you to a fantastic podcast called the Lifestyle Business Podcast. And that's all about starting digital products and apps and, creating businesses on a shoestring budget. Businesses
that give you a lifestyle that you might want. Whereas, I got to say, Matt, I wouldn't want to by choice of being in Bogota 6, 7, 8 times a year. It's not my lifestyle preference, but I got to be,
And just one other thing too, you can still be involved if you're in a type of food business where you have to import ingredients and so forth, importing products, but with less restriction, right? We talked about food with sanitation and permits. Just a very generic example, iPod cases and things that you can have made in China and shipped. There are going to be some headaches there, sure. You may have the same problem with startup capital and in managing inventory, et cetera, but they're going to be non-perishable, and a lot of these products are going to have less government intervention, so it's going to be easier to get them into the U.S., and you can hold the inventory for a lot longer.
Yeah, and Matt, I want to bring up one more point. I think one great advantage you and I have with being in the food industry is located where we are, because if we're located in the United States, it's really hard to break in because it's harder to gain big business contacts in the States if you don't have something special about you. Now, in Colombia, there's a lot of great food, natural food. And so working with that, Americans, for example, if our target market is Americans, if they hear that, that might get their ears perked a little bit. But that's something that I do want to say has been great for us.
Yeah, it's a lot easier here when we're not established being a big fish in a small pond. That's what we're trying to be because, a lot of people are talking to the U.S. The only reason they take my calls, I'm an American that has experience here in Colombia.
Yeah, so you have to build out something that is different for you, whether it's in digital products right now and food later, or if you're going to jump into the industry right now and make an investment in yourself in some way, then, you got to be careful about what you do and you got to be wise about it.
All right. And in the future, we're going to want to bring on some food projects that have been funded by Kickstarter. I met some at a trade show last year, so I think that would be cool to hear their challenges. And I'd really, this has been, 7 months since that trade show to find out where they are today.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that, Matt. Guys, thanks a lot for joining us today. We had a blast talking just about some easy things, some hard things, some things about the food business like travel. We're going to link up to them. Let us know what you think.
Great. So yeah, all the free travel tips and even a great resource for digital products and apps. It will all be on the website, foodstartupspodcast.com. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, if you have any questions or comments, find us online at foodstartupspodcast.com.